My name is Elizabeth Moore. I'm 32 years old. And until 2 weeks ago, I thought I was about to marry the man I'd spend the rest of my life with. If you'd asked me back then, I would have told you my life was stable, boringly happy, even. A shared home, wedding plans pinned neatly to the fridge, a future that felt mapped out in sensible, predictable lines. I didn't know that predictability was exactly what he was trying to escape. We'd been together for 3 years, engaged for 6 months. We met at a mutual friend's backyard barbecue, one of those lazy summer afternoons where the beer is warm, the music is too loud, and somehow, in the middle of it all, you lock eyes with a stranger and feel like the rest of the noise fades away. That's what it felt like with Daniel. He was charming without trying too hard, funny in a dry, understated way. The kind of man who listened when you spoke, at least that's what I thought at the time. We moved in together after a year, bought a house 6 months later. The house was technically mine. I'd used an inheritance from my grandparents for the entire down payment. Daniel helped with the mortgage and utilities, and we agreed, clearly, calmly, that we'd add his name to the deed after the wedding. 3 months away. Everything was booked. Venue, planner, deposits paid. About $15,000 spent already, most of it from my savings. Daniel had contributed some, and his father had generously offered to help with the wedding costs, too. On paper, it all made sense. But paper doesn't capture tone shifts, or hesitation, or the way someone starts guarding their phone like it contains state secrets. Looking back now, the signs were obvious. Daniel had started smiling at messages he wouldn't explain, going out with friends more often, taking calls in other rooms, laughing softly at things he wouldn't share with me. I told myself I was being paranoid. Wedding stress, I reasoned. Everyone says this is the hardest part. Then came the dinner. We were sitting across from each other at our dining table, half-eaten plates between us. I remember the exact moment he put his fork down, the pause before he spoke, the way his eyes didn't quite meet mine. "Elizabeth," he said calmly, "I've been thinking." My stomach tightened. "I think maybe we should take a short break." The word landed wrong, heavy, disorienting. "A break?" I asked. "From what?" "From us," he replied gently, too gently. "Just a little time apart. Clear our heads before the wedding. Make sure we're doing the right thing." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. It didn't come. "Is something wrong?" I asked. "Are you having doubts?" "No," he said quickly. "Nothing like that. It's just stress. Wedding planning, work. I think space could actually make us stronger." I didn't feel strained. I didn't feel unsure. But I nodded anyway. "How long?" I asked. "A week, maybe 2. I'll stay with family." "And during this break," I pressed, my voice careful, "are we still exclusive?" He hesitated. Just a fraction of a second. "Of course," he said. "This isn't about seeing other people." I didn't believe him. But I also didn't want to be the woman who demanded reassurance, the one who questioned every move. So I smiled, swallowed my instinct. "Sounds fair," I said. He looked relieved, hugged me, promised we'd be better for it. He packed a bag and left within the hour. The house felt wrong without him. Too quiet, too empty. That night I didn't sleep, and by morning I knew something was deeply, irreversibly broken. The morning after Daniel left, the house didn't feel peaceful. It felt staged, like someone had walked through my life, straightened the picture frames, turned off the lights, and left behind a silence that wasn't natural. Silence that demanded I either ignore it or listen closely enough to hear what was hiding underneath. I tried to do the healthy thing first. I made coffee. I answered a few work emails. I even folded laundry that didn't need folding, just to keep my hands busy. But my mind kept replaying that moment at dinner, the way his fork touched the plate, the way his eyes slid away from mine, the microscopic hesitation when I asked if we were still exclusive. "A week or 2, clear our heads." It sounded so reasonable. That was the problem. Daniel wasn't always reasonable. Daniel was impulsive, emotional, dramatic even. If he wanted space, he'd normally pick a fight and storm out for an hour, then come back with flowers and that sheepish grin that used to melt me. This time he had been measured, prepared, and that chilled me more than anger ever could. By noon, I gave up pretending I was fine. In the living room, on the shelf beneath the TV, sat our shared iPad. We used it for recipes, streaming, wedding spreadsheets, little domestic things that made us feel like a team. Daniel had insisted on syncing everything for convenience. I remember him saying it like it was romantic. "What's mine is yours," he'd told me once, tapping my nose playfully. Now my fingers hovered over the screen, and my stomach twisted like it already knew what I was about to find. I wasn't proud of it. But pride felt like a luxury meant for people whose hearts weren't starting to rot from the inside out. I picked up the iPad. It unlocked instantly. No password needed. Like he wanted me to find it. Or like he was so confident I wouldn't dare. I opened messages. At first, it was harmless. Group chats with his friends, a thread with his father, a few wedding-related texts from vendors. Then I saw a contact name that made my pulse jump. Jenna, work. I stared at it, confused. Daniel had mentioned a Jenna before, but only in passing. Just a co-worker who was apparently a little dramatic and always had something going on. I clicked, and the room tilted. The messages didn't start with flirting. They started with intimacy, like two people who had already been touching each other for a while and were now just continuing the conversation like it was normal. Her. Can't stop thinking about last night. Daniel. Me neither. I've missed you more than I admitted. Her. So when is your break happening, Daniel? Tonight. She'll buy it. My breath turned shallow. She'll buy it. Not I hope she understands. Not I feel guilty. Not I don't know if I can do this. Just she'll buy it. Like I was a predictable machine that spit out trust on command. I scrolled, hands shaking so hard I had to brace my elbow on the table to steady myself. There were weeks of messages. 2 months, maybe more. Plans layered over lies. Little jokes between them about my sweetness, my blind faith, how I was so easy to manage when I'm focused on the wedding. Then came the line that made my throat close like a fist had grabbed it. Her. Once the wedding is off, we can finally stop sneaking around. Daniel. Yeah, I just need to get through this cleanly. Let her think it's mutual. Mutual. Like betrayal could be softened if you wrapped it in therapy language. I sat down on the couch so suddenly I almost missed it and landed awkwardly, my knees hitting the coffee table. I didn't even feel the pain. Because my brain had shifted into that strange, icy state that happens when reality becomes too sharp. I kept scrolling. And then I saw photos. Not the kind you could excuse. Not the kind you could misinterpret. Not the kind that could be explained away with. It's not what it looks like. Daniel's skin. Her skin. Their bodies caught in angles that screamed one thing. This wasn't a mistake. This was a relationship. And buried among them was the most recent message, sent just yesterday. After dinner, after the break proposal, after he hugged me like he loved me. Her. He bought the break idea. Daniel. Told you it would work? I stared at that sentence for a long time. Because something inside me, something soft and hopeful, died quietly while I watched. Not with a dramatic crash. Not with screaming. Just a silence, a final understanding. The uncertainty was gone. And in a strange, horrifying way, that brought relief. I didn't cry right away. I didn't throw the iPad. I didn't call him. I did something far colder. I started taking screenshots. Every message, every plan, every laugh at my expense, every mention of money, every sentence that proved he wasn't just cheating, he was calculating. I saved them into a folder on my phone, labeling it with a name that felt almost absurdly calm. Evidence. My hands moved like I was on autopilot, but my heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might burst through my ribs. And then, as I kept reading, I found the part that made my blood turn to ice all over again. They weren't just sleeping together. They were planning what would happen after. They talked about the wedding money, about his father's contribution, about taking a trip somewhere tropical once everything's settled. They even joked about how Daniel would look like the good guy if he framed it as a mutual breakup. And that was the moment I realized something important. This wasn't a break. It was a strategy. And I was the only person in the room who didn't know I was being played. I set the iPad down slowly. I stood up, walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water. My hands were steady now. Not because I wasn't hurt, but because the part of me that wanted to beg had been replaced by something harder, something sharper, something that whispered, "He thinks you'll crumble. He thinks you'll negotiate your own dignity. He thinks you'll stay because you've already invested so much." I stared out the kitchen window at the yard we'd planned to decorate for summer barbecues, the porch where we'd imagined taking morning coffee as husband and wife. My reflection in the glass looked like a woman I didn't recognize. Her eyes were wide, but they weren't helpless. They were awake. And in that moment, I didn't wonder if I was leaving. I only wondered how cleanly I could cut him out of my life without letting him take anything else from me. I reached for my phone, not to call Daniel, not to confront him, but to start making calls that would change everything. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I didn't send a single angry message. Instead, I opened my laptop. There's a moment after betrayal, if you're unlucky enough to experience it, where emotion begs to take the wheel. where your body wants confrontation, explanations, apologies that feel like oxygen. But I'd already given Daniel enough oxygen. What I felt now wasn't rage. It was clarity. The first call I made was to our wedding planner, Marissa. Her name popped up instantly in my contacts, right beside a dozen spreadsheets labeled Final Guest Count and Table Settings. Documents that now felt like artifacts from another lifetime. She answered on the second ring, cheerful as ever. "Hi, Elizabeth. I was just about to email you about the florist." "Marissa," I interrupted, my voice steady in a way that surprised even me. "I need to cancel the wedding." Silence. Then, carefully, "Are you okay?" "I will be," I said, and I meant it. I didn't give her every detail. Just enough. There had been an affair. The wedding was no longer happening. I was the primary contact on most vendor contracts, and I needed to know what my options were. Marissa shifted seamlessly into professional mode, the kind of calm competence you don't appreciate until your life starts falling apart. She explained timelines, refunds, non-refundable deposits, what could be salvaged, what couldn't. All told, we'd already spent about $15,000. She estimated I'd get back roughly $8, maybe a little more if vendors showed compassion. I thanked her. She hesitated. "Elizabeth, I'm so sorry. If you need anything at all, let me know." "I will," I said. And for the first time since yesterday, my voice wavered just slightly. The second call was to my bank. Because love might be emotional, but separation is administrative. I spoke with a personal banker, explained the situation, and confirmed what I already knew. The joint checking account was technically mine. Daniel was an authorized user, not a co-owner. I could remove him, but I wouldn't. Not yet. I transferred exactly his contribution, $5,000, into a new account. Clean, documented, untouchable. Money he couldn't later claim I'd stolen or withheld. I wanted the ending to be indisputable. Then I scheduled an appointment with a real estate agent. That one felt surreal. I walked him through the house that afternoon, listening as he talked about curb appeal and market demand like we weren't standing in the ruins of my engagement. The housing market was hot, he said. We could list immediately. Expect interest within days. "Is your partner on the deed?" he asked casually. "No," I replied. He nodded. "Then you're clear." By the time he left, the paperwork was ready, photos scheduled, a listing drafted. And still no tears. That came later. The hardest call came last. Daniel's father, Michael. He'd always been kind to me. Old school, honest to a fault. The kind of man who believed commitment meant something because he'd lived long enough to see what happened when it didn't. He'd contributed generously to the wedding. Money he'd saved because he believed he was helping his son build a future. A future that, according to Daniel's messages, was already being dismantled behind his back. I stared at my phone for a long time before sending anything. When I finally did, I chose my words carefully. No insults, no embellishment, no photos. Just screenshots of messages that showed the affair. The break, the plan, the money. And one sentence. "I thought you deserved to know the truth before any more damage was done." I sent it. Then I set my phone face down on the table and didn't touch it again. By evening, the house smelled like cardboard and dust. I packed my things methodically. Clothes first, documents, personal items Daniel wouldn't notice until it was too late. At sunset, the real estate agent returned. He planted the "for sale" sign in the front yard with professional efficiency. I watched from the porch as the metal stake slid into the soil. Something about it felt ceremonial, like a boundary being drawn, like a decision made irreversible. I poured myself a glass of bourbon, something I rarely drank, and finally sat down. 6 hours. That's how long it took to dismantle a relationship I'd spent 3 years building. My phone buzzed once, then twice, then 3 times. I didn't check it. I already knew what it would say. 2 days passed. I took time off work, claiming a family emergency that wasn't technically a lie. I packed more, slept poorly, ignored my phone until the battery died. The house was officially listed. By the second day, there were 3 showing requests and 1 verbal offer above asking price. At 6 p.m., the doorbell rang. I didn't jump. I didn't rush. I walked to the door slowly, my heart steady, my mind clear. When I opened it, Daniel stood on the porch. His eyes were red, his face pale, his confidence gone. Behind him, planted proudly in the yard, was the "for sale" sign. He stared at it, then at me, and in that moment I knew the break hadn't gone the way he planned. Daniel's mouth opened, then closed again. He looked past me, into the house, at the stacks of boxes lining the hallway like quiet witnesses. "What the hell is going on?" he finally asked, his voice cracking. I stepped aside just enough for him to see everything. Every packed corner, every stripped wall, the unmistakable absence of us. I think you know, I said calmly. He laughed once, sharply, like the sound hurt him. Elizabeth, this is insane. You're selling the house? I am. You can't just do that, he snapped, panic creeping into his tone. We didn't even talk about this. We talked about a break, I replied. I'm just getting perspective, same as you. His eyes flicked to mine, searching for something. Anger, grief, pleading. He found none. What is this really about? He demanded. Because if this is about space, you've made your point. I took a breath. I saw the messages, Daniel. His face drained of color so fast it was almost frightening. What messages? The ones with your ex-girlfriend, I said. The ones where you laughed about me buying it. The ones where you planned to cancel the wedding and spend your father's money on a vacation once everything settled. The words landed heavily between us. For a moment, he looked like he might collapse. Then his expression shifted, defensive first, then desperate. You went through my things, he said, latching onto the one detail that made him feel less guilty. That's a huge violation, Elizabeth. You left the iPad logged in, I replied. Careless. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing the porch like a trapped animal. It's not what it looks like, he said quickly. Jenna and we just reconnected. It didn't mean anything. I cut him off gently. Don't. He froze. I read everything, I continued. Every message, every plan, every joke about me. So if you're going to lie, at least don't insult my intelligence while you do it. His shoulders slumped. Then came the tears. I made a mistake, he said, voice breaking. A stupid, selfish mistake. But we can work through this. I love you, not her. That's not what you told her, I said quietly. Not 2 days ago, not last week, not when you were in her bed. He swallowed hard. My dad called me, he whispered. I nodded. I figured. He's furious, Daniel said. He said I'm just like my mother. His parents' divorce had been ugly. His mother's affair, the thing no one talked about, but everyone remembered. The irony didn't escape either of us. He deserved to know, I said. He gave us money for a wedding you were already planning to cancel. Daniel looked around again, like the truth was finally catching up with him. You're really doing this, he said, ending everything over one mistake. It wasn't one mistake, I replied. It was dozens of decisions, repeatedly, with intention. Silence stretched. Finally, he asked, where am I supposed to go? I met his gaze. That's not my problem. His voice dropped. Jenna kicked me out. I raised an eyebrow. She said it was too complicated now, he added bitterly, that everything blew up. Of course it did. Seems like she wasn't interested in the aftermath, I said. Just the fantasy. He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Can I at least come in and get my things, he asked. I already packed them, I said. They're in the garage. There's also an envelope with a check, your $5,000. Every cent you contributed. He stared at me. You planned this. Yes. We carried the boxes to his car in silence. 4 trips. Each one felt lighter. When everything was loaded, he turned to me one last time, eyes wet. I really did love you, Elizabeth. I studied his face, the man I'd almost married, the future I'd almost surrendered myself to. No, I said softly. You loved what I made easy for you. He flinched. Then he got in his car and drove away. I went back inside. The house felt emptier than ever, but for the first time since the break, the silence didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like space. The weeks that followed blurred together in a way I still have trouble explaining. Grief doesn't always arrive the way people expect it to. There were no dramatic sobs on the kitchen floor, no sleepless nights replaying our happiest memories like a punishment. Instead, it came in quiet waves, small, sharp reminders that cut when I least expected them. An empty side of the bed, a mug left untouched in the cabinet, the echo of a future that had once felt inevitable. The house sold faster than even the agent predicted. Multiple offers came in within days, and we accepted one $50,000 above asking price. The closing process took just over a month, long enough for me to say goodbye properly, short enough that I didn't have time to second-guess myself. During that time, I moved with purpose. I downsized, found a smaller place closer to work, somewhere that felt like a beginning rather than a memorial. When the sale finalized, the first thing I did was repay Michael every dollar he'd given toward the wedding. He insisted we meet in person. We sat across from each other at a quiet cafe, sunlight slanting through the windows like it didn't realize it was witnessing something heavy. You didn't have to do this, he said, pushing the envelope back toward me. I did, I replied. It was never my money to keep. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "You're a good woman, Elizabeth," he said quietly. "I'm sorry my son couldn't be the man you deserved." That was the moment I finally cried. Not because I missed Daniel, but because someone had seen the truth of what happened and honored it. Our social circle fractured in predictable ways. Some of Daniel's friends avoided me entirely, uncomfortable with the reality that loyalty sometimes demands choosing sides. Others offered awkward sympathy, unsure what to say. A few people I hadn't heard from in years reached out, quietly pulling me back into parts of my life I'd let shrink while I was busy building a future that wasn't real. I learned who was capable of sitting with discomfort, and who wasn't. As for Daniel, I heard about him through fragments and whispers. He'd moved in with a friend, then with his parents for a while. He was working on himself, according to mutual acquaintances. Jenna, his ex-girlfriend, disappeared from the story almost as quickly as she'd entered it. Funny how that works. There were nights I lay awake wondering if I could have handled things differently. Been more forgiving, more patient. Tried therapy, counseling, one last conversation to get closure. But then I'd remember the messages, the laughter, the way he'd framed betrayal as strategy. And the doubt would dissolve, because some betrayals aren't emotional mistakes. They're moral ones. 3 months after the sale, I stood in my new living room surrounded by half-unpacked boxes and felt something unfamiliar settle into my chest. Peace. It wasn't joy, not yet, but it was honest, and it was mine. It's been exactly 1 year since the night I opened that iPad. 1 year since clarity arrived, disguised as devastation. My new house is smaller than the one Daniel and I shared, but it feels truer. Every room carries intention. I painted the walls myself. Soft, warm colors, instead of the sterile neutrals we'd chosen to appeal to resale value. I built a small deck out back, learned the hard way that power tools don't forgive impatience, and adopted a rescue dog named Cooper, a clumsy, big-hearted mutt who snores louder than seems physically possible. He sleeps on the couch beside me now. Career-wise, life surprised me. 6 months after everything fell apart, my company was acquired. Restructuring followed, anxious weeks of uncertainty, but somehow I emerged with a promotion. I manage a team now. I speak with more confidence. It turns out surviving betrayal teaches you how to trust your judgment in rooms full of people trying to test it. Daniel and I don't speak, but news travels. After bouncing between friends' couches, he moved back in with his parents. Humbling, I imagine, especially with his father fully aware of why the wedding never happened. From what I've heard, Daniel tried to reconnect with Jenna months later. She declined. Shocking, I know. Michael and I still meet for lunch occasionally. Not often, but enough. He never asks about Daniel. Instead, he talks about books he's reading, lessons he learned too late, the strange ways life reroutes us when we're stubborn enough to believe we know where we're going. We can't control what happens to us, he told me once, only how we respond. Coming from anyone else, it might have sounded like a platitude. From him, it carried weight. Dating came back into my life quietly, carefully. I made mistakes at first, leading with my trauma, explaining myself too much, apologizing for boundaries that didn't need justification. Eventually, I learned to stop doing that. I've been seeing someone for 3 months now. Mark. He's nothing like Daniel, honest to the point of awkwardness, emotionally consistent. He knows my past, but doesn't treat me like I'm fragile or broken. We're taking things slowly. And for the first time, slow doesn't feel like fear. The most unexpected moment came last month. A letter arrived in the mail. Not an email, not a text. A handwritten letter from Daniel. He didn't ask for forgiveness, didn't make excuses. He wrote about therapy, about patterns he didn't understand before, about realizing that love isn't something you manage, it's something you protect. I didn't know what real love looked like, he wrote. I think I'm starting to now. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. I didn't respond, not out of anger, but because his healing no longer required my participation. Looking back, I still believe I did the right thing. Not perfectly, but decisively. There's power in refusing to be the victim of someone else's choices, in choosing dignity over desperation, in walking away without begging for explanations you already understand. That for sale sign Daniel saw that day wasn't just about a house. It was a declaration that I valued myself enough to leave someone who didn't. 1 year later, I can say this with certainty. I'm grateful, not for the betrayal, but for the clarity it brought. Some endings aren't failures. They're corrections.